So as we now head into another international break, and we've had 11 games played so far this season in the Championship, what I thought we'd do for a video today is go to every Championship club and I'll give you guys who for me has been their best and worst player so far this season. Obviously I want to get your guys' input into this video, so feel free to leave in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree. Who for you has been a standout performer at your club, and who on the other hand you think's been underachieving? I think I've got some interesting shouts in here. We'll be working our way from the top of the Championship moving down. So without any further ado, let's hop into this one. So starting out with West Brom at the top of the Championship. Now for their best player, there's a lot of contenders for this one. I could have picked any of that forward four. We spoke about the midfield too last time with Soyuz and Livermore, who I think have been quite underrated for West Brom so far. But for their best player, I'm going to have to give it to Pereira. There was quite a bit of discussions in the comments of the last video that is Pereira the best player in the Championship at the moment. I think there's got to be an argument for that. He's been playing in that number 10 role and he's just been an absolute joy to watch. 2 goals, 4 assists, but that doesn't really do him justice because he is an absolute magician on the ball. In terms of West Brom's worst player, I mean, it's been a brilliant start to the season, but I'm probably going to have to go for Hal Robson-Kanu. When you're a striker and you've got more yellow cards than goals so far this season, chances are it's not been a great start to the season. He's not scored a goal for them this season, although the majority of his appearances have been off the bench so far. Sorry Robson-Kanu, but I'm putting him as the worst. Nottingham Forest have looked great so far this season, currently sat second in the Championship, and they play some brilliant football going forward, but for their best player so far this season, I'm actually going to give it to Bryce Samba, their goalkeeper. I think that since coming into the first team, they've looked so much more assured at the back, and a top quality keeper is what they have been lacking in recent years, but they've got just that in Samba. And then for their worst player so far this season, I'm probably going to give that to Muric, the goalkeeper who lost his place to Samba earlier on in the season. He's only played 4 matches for Forest, but it's fair to say this loan spell for Man City has not gone to plan. He had an absolute horror show on his debut against West Brom, having 2 howlers in that game. For his last 2 matches for club and country, he's conceded 10 goals, 5 against England and 5 against Arsenal in the Cup for Forest. So for their worst player, I'm probably going to have to give it to Muric. 2 very different goalkeepers. Preston North End is going to be an easy one. Of course, it's going to be Daniel Johnson. He's been involved in more goals than any other player this far into the season, with 7 goals and 4 assists. What an unbelievable season and turnaround it's been for Daniel Johnson. You know, half the fan base wanted him sold in the summer, but since being progressed into that number 10 role, he's been absolutely unplayable. 2 goals and an assist in his last performance against Barnsley. He's been wreaking havoc for Championship defenders so far. In terms of North End's worst player, there are a couple who could creep into that conversation. Jayden Stockley, although hasn't really been given much of a chance when he has played, hasn't looked great. Andre Green's not really had the impact that a lot of Preston fans were hoping he would. And one that I'd throw into the equation, not been our worst player so far this season, but someone who has been a little bit disappointing, has been Alan Brown. Obviously, he's been displaced in the team by Daniel Johnson, so he has been playing out of position, but he just doesn't quite seem to be the same player at the moment, maybe lacking a bit of confidence. Which one's his best player so far this season? I'm probably going to give that to Andre Ayew, someone who, especially at this level, has the ability to completely change a game. With 2 goals and 3 assists for Swansea so far this season, he's been an integral part of them going forward. And if he keeps up this form, I could easily see him getting into double figures for goals and assists this season. In terms of their worst, I wouldn't say that Swansea have had a bad player per se so far this season, so probably the most disappointing for me has been Christopher Peterson, just for the fact that he's not really been given a chance in the team yet. I think he's made 2 appearances, both off the bench for Swansea so far, and I'd like to see him being given a run in the team. I think they're lacking a little bit of pace and movement off the ball at the moment. I know they've been playing Selena out on that left-hand side. I'd like to see maybe Selena push back into that number 10 position and then give someone like Peterson a run in the team. With Leeds United, there's a few players who I think you could say have been the best for them so far. Pablo Hernandez, brilliant when he's played, but he has been out injured lately. For their best, I'd probably just give it to Ben White ahead of Calvin Phillips, who's also been excellent, just for the fact that he's been brought in as a Pontus Jansson replacement and he's seamlessly fit into that Leeds system. We've seen from other players that it takes them a while to adapt to the Bielsa system, but Ben White has done that instantly. In terms of Leeds' worst player, in terms of a disappointing player for me so far, it's probably been Helder Costa. Now, he's not necessarily been given, you know, the most game time so far. He's only made 3 starts for Leeds so far. The majority of his appearances have come off the bench, but you can tell there's a player there, but there just seems to be quite a bit of inconsistency about Costa so far this season. Bristol City's best player, I think there's quite a few to choose from. Benik Afobe, when he was fit, was brilliant. Josh Brownell's been solid for them. Jack Hunt recently, absolutely devastating with assists from that right-hand side. But for their best player, I'd probably just give it to Weimann. You know, he's been involved in more goals than anyone else in that Bristol City squad so far, with 4 goals and 2 assists. Can play anywhere along the forward line, and his overall play is very good even when he's not scoring. In terms of their worst player, I'm probably going to give it to Molly Watkins. He's made 1 appearance appearance for them so far this season. That was against Preston, where he did absolutely nothing. I don't know why he's still at the club, to be honest. With Fulham, I think their best player this season has probably been between Tom Kenny and Cavaleiro, both of them scoring goals so far. Cavaleiro has been absolutely devastating and has scored some absolute worldies, and Tom Kenny joins him in that bracket. It's sort of become a trademark for Tom Kenny to just unleash one from outside the box and it to gracefully bend into the top corner. Tom Kenny's another player probably in the conversation for the best player in the league at the moment. In terms of their worst player, I'd probably say in terms of someone who's playing regularly for Fulham, Bettinelli has been maybe a bit of a weak link in that team so far. I'd like to see them give Rodak a run in the team. I really liked the look of him while he was out on loan at Rotherham for the past couple of seasons, but thinking back to that absolute howler he had against West Brom, that's an area where they could look to improve. Sheffield Wednesday have got quite a few to pick for their best player so far. Stephen Fletcher's been absolutely brilliant, scoring 5 goals for them. I'd probably give it to Kadeem Harris just about. I think his impact since coming into the side, he's really made a difference for them going forward. Barry Bannon's been good in recent weeks, and probably of the last like 4 or 5 matches, Julian Bourne has also got to be in that conversation. He's been absolutely colossal for them at the back. In terms of Wednesday's worst player, probably going to have to give that to Odebajo. I've not really been convinced by him since coming in at Wednesday so far. He had an absolute howler of a game at Deepdale earlier on in the season when he gave away 2 penalties. QPR's best player so far this season, probably going to have to give that one to Eze. I think he's really developed his game from last year, where we saw, you know, glimpses now and again from him, but now he's really putting that consistency into his game with 4 goals and 2 assists so far. But some of the standout players for them so far, Ryan Manning, obviously you got the 2 strikers, Hugill and Wells, who have both scored 6 goals so far this season. They're worth a shout as well. For their worst player, I'm probably going to have to give it to Joe Lumley. Been a bit of a weak spot for QPR this season. He's made a couple of mistakes so far, thinking back to that West Brom game, and of course now has been dropped to the bench. Although since Liam Kelly has come in, he's not really done any better. So for their worst player, I'd probably give it to one of the goalkeepers. For Charlton's best player, I'm going to go for Conor Gallagher actually. I think for a fairly unknown player to come into the Championship this season and absolutely smash it the way Gallagher has so far, that deserves recognition obviously. Lyle Taylor's grabbed a lot of the headlines, but he's been out injured lately. Pratley and Pearce are also worth a shout, but for what Gallagher's brought to the team for the age he is at the moment, I think he's absolutely smashed it for them so far. For Charlton's worst player, I'm probably going to go for Tom Ahmed, someone who I had quite high expectations of when they signed him, but's not really gone on to do anything so far. I know that he has been injured lately, but when he has made appearances for them, not really set the world alight yet to score for them so far. Cardiff was a tough one to choose. Statistically so far this season, their best player has been Sean Morrison, so I've gone for him. He's already had 3 man-of-the-match performances for Cardiff, obviously being that leader at the back for them, and has formed a decent partnership with Flint so far. In terms of their worst player, I'm probably going to have to go for Will Vokes. He was a player who I was really excited to see in this Cardiff system after really impressing me at Rotherham last season, but he's only made 1 start for Cardiff so far, and that was in their 3-0 defeat against Reading, where he was brought off at half-time after he was completely overrun in midfield, so not really been a great start to his career at Cardiff. For Birmingham's best player, I'm going to give it to Jude Bellingham. He's a 16-year-old who's already scored 2 match winners for Birmingham so far this season. I saw the game they had on Friday night. I thought he was brilliant in that midfield going up against Middlesbrough, and the future's certainly bright for him. For their worst player, I'm probably going to have to give it to Lee Camp, aren't I? I mean, I feel like Birmingham fans have such a love-hate relationship with Lee Camp. One week he can, you know, get you out of trouble and pull off a miraculous save, and the other week he goes just prime Lee Camp and has an absolute howler. You know, we saw it in the game against Derby and especially in the game against Wigan, where he dropped an absolutely awful clanger. For Derby, it's been a season to forget so far, but for their best player, I don't think you can look past Chris Martin at the moment and the impact that he's had since coming back into this Derby side. I can't believe that he's scoring goals for them in 2019 really, but he has certainly come back on the scene after scoring that late equaliser against Leeds United. In 3 starts and 2 appearances from the bench, he scored 3 goals and got an assist. For their worst player, there's a couple to choose from with Derby so far this season. For me personally though, it's going to have to be Joseph Zoon. I've watched him play a few times and I have no idea what he offers to that squad. If you're trying to think of strengths of Joseph Zoon's game, I've got nothing. The signing's not worked out since he's come into the club, and with Derby no longer having the threat of like Harry Wilson down that right-hand side, Joseph Zoon's been getting more game time, and it's fair to say he's not delivered. Blackburn Rovers, their best player so far this season, probably going to go for Stuart Downing actually. When they made that signing, I wasn't all too convinced. I thought he'd have a few appearances off the bench here and there, but he's actually been an integral part of their midfield so far, and he brings a lot of quality into that side. In terms of their worst player, I wasn't really too sure who to go with. Maybe Bell at left back. I think that whenever Cunningham's not in the squad, they look a lot weaker down that left-hand side. Millwall have had a bit of a dodgy start to the season, but someone who I think has caused other sides problems has been Matt Smith. You know, with balls being swung into the box, he's been a real threat for them, scoring 3 goals and getting 2 assists so far. On the flip side of that, a striker who hasn't quite had the same impact since coming in has been Bod Vardsson. I think in both league starts that he's made for Millwall, Millwall have gone to lose those matches. He's not scored in the league yet. I think as soon as he does get that first league goal, then maybe a few more will follow. Hull City, for their best player for me, is probably between Kevin Stewart and Kamil Grosicki. Grosicki scored some outrageous goals so far this season, but I'd probably just edge Stewart as their best player so far. He scored 2 and got 1 assist, but what he offers and brings to this whole squad off the ball, he's really important to the system in the way that they win the ball back and then gets them progressing going forward. So Kevin Stewart's been excellent for me so far. For their worst player, I'm going to say Josh McGuinness. I didn't understand the signing at the time, and I still don't understand that. He's had more red cards than goals this season, and he's a striker. For Brentford's best player, it's probably hard to look past Ollie Watkins, who has 7 goals for them, obviously playing in that striker role for this season, although I do still feel as if they are lacking that natural striker in that squad, but he's done well to fill the void so far. For their worst player so far, I really wasn't sure who to go for. Maybe a couple of their new signings haven't bedded in as well as a lot of people thought. We're still really waiting to see the impact of the likes of Corellis and Valencia can have on this squad. With Luton, I have been impressed with James Collins so far, scoring 5 goals for them. He gets into a lot of dangerous areas for Luton, and if you do give him the service, he will score goals. And that's, of course, going to be massive for them going forward this season and their hopes of survival. For their worst player, I'm going to have to give it to Simon Sluga, a club record signing which hasn't really gone to plan so far. He's dropped quite a few clangers. He's dug them out on a couple of occasions, but I can't look past that awful display he had at Derby last week. Wigan's best player for me is probably between Charlie Mulgrew and Dunkley. I'd say that for the goals that Dunkley scored for them lately, I've probably just edged him as their best player. For their worst player, I'm going to say Gavin Massey. I just don't think he offers a lot for a winger. As this Wigan fan puts it, Nathan Byrne and Gavin Massey is quite possibly the worst right-hand side of any football team ever, and I mean, he's not been great so far, it's fair to say. Middlesbrough's best player, I'm going to say Darren Randolph. I think that in quite a few occasions, if it wasn't for Randolph, then Borough could have been on the receiving end of quite a few harsh scorelines. He's dug them out on a couple of occasions so far this season. We saw that on Friday night last time, you know, when he made a lot of saves against Birmingham. Kept them in that game for a long time, but he can only do so much for this side. Their worst player, I'm going to go for George Saville. I think that since making his move to Borough, things haven't really worked out for him, especially this season. He looks a shadow of his former self. He's not really played all too much football, but when he has, he's really not been playing well. I think for Huddersfield's best player, you have to give it to Colin Grant, really. Even when they weren't playing well, he was still scoring goals for them, and I think that now that they are looking a lot better going forward, we could now be seeing the best of Colin Grant in the Championship. I still think he'll be a top Championship striker. You know, with how much they've been struggling, he's still scored 6 goals and got an assist. Then for their worst player, I mean, there's a lot to pick from. For me personally, probably going to go for Haderjanai, their right back. Down that right hand side was a real weakness for them. When you're a fullback and you can't defend, that's not going to end well for you. Although there are quite a few Huddersfield players who I could throw into this video. Now to Reading, who have just parted company with manager Jose Gomez. So Reading fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. It's not been a great season for them so far. In terms of their best player, it's got to be between Swift and Ajaria. I'd probably just give it to Ajaria. I think he's a really classy player when he is on the ball, but Swift's done excellent for them so far. He's just not had a striker to put away those chances. In terms of their worst player, lately you'd probably throw Puskas into that. He's a striker who's not playing with confidence. He had one brilliant game against Cardiff, but was never able to follow that up. Another shout in there, João Virginia had 2 performances in goal for them at the start of the season, which eventually led to him getting dropped after those 2 games. Weak performances against Sheffield Wednesday and Hull, not a great goalkeeper. Barnsley, another side who have been struggling, and another manager who has left the Championship as well. We've had this fire sale of managers leaving lately. So Barnsley fans, let me know down below what you've made of all the recent goings on at the club. In terms of their best player, I'd probably give it to Alex Mowat. I don't think that Barnsley have had all too many players so far who look like they belong at this level. Mowat would be one of those players. For their worst player, I'm probably going to go for Jordan Williams, a defender who's been caught out quite a bit so far this season. But Barnsley, another one where I could throw quite a few players into that one, really. And then finally for Stoke City. Now, their best player, I mean, this was a bit of a tricky one to pick from, really. I'm going to say Ndiaye, though. Whenever he has played, I think that he is actually a very good midfielder. And the more I see of him, the more I actually like him. I think if he's utilised from now until the end of the season, then Stoke will have a fighting chance this season. In terms of their worst player, I mean, how long have you got? I could pick pretty much any of that starting 11 from Stoke, but in terms of who's been probably the most disappointing, you can't look any further than Jack Butland. He's made a series of high-profile mistakes. obviously I saw firsthand from the performance he had at Deepdale how far Jack Butland has fallen off from a couple of years ago, but so far it's been a season for him and Stoke to forget. They'll be hoping that first win last week will be putting them in the right direction from now on. But guys, there you have it. There was every Championship club and who for me has been their best and worst player so far this season. So do you guys agree with my selections? Let me know in the comments down below. Interested to see what you guys have to say about this one. But apart from that, that will not wrap it up for today's video, guys. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure you leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Make sure you subscribe for a bit more regular Championship content. But apart from that, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.